welcome to episode 6. This is the Entanglement, and today here we have Dina Fisher, and I'm Alex. So, gotta say I've been pretty excited for this one for a while. I met Dina here at ToolBox LA. So, today we're actually filming at ToolBox LA, and if you've never heard of it, go follow them, especially if you're a creator, innovator, or somebody who just wants to start up their own business. Check out ToolBox LA, amazing place to be at, and full of creatives here. So we'll get started. So Dina's an artist from Los Angeles who creates a variety of type of art, including art installations, light-reactive murals, paintings, and much more. And today you guys are gonna get to know her, a little bit about what she does and some of her cool art. So Dina, you moved here from Pennsylvania, correct? Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
When did you make that move here, and how was it moving from Pennsylvania to Los Angeles?
It's pretty mind-blowing. So, I was 13, and I had grown up literally in a forest near Lake Erie. So my playground was forest trails and creeks. So, like, we were little forest creatures, really. That's what we were. Like, my favorite thing, one of the biggest memories of my childhood is playing on fallen trees, and like when the snow melts, it's a big deal for a kid back in Pennsylvania. So going up to the trees in the spring after the snow melt and watching for these little flowers, they were little white lilies. And I remember being on all fours, just like looking for those little lilies, and they smelled really good. So coming here, like my dad was already here. He moved before us. So my mom loads 3 kids, a dog, and a cat into the station wagon, and we drive across the country. So anyhow, I just remember we're driving through either Arizona or Nevada or something, and it was really hot in the car. And I put my hand out the window thinking I was going to cool myself down. And the air was hot. Yeah. Like the wind was hot on my hand. And I had never in my life even imagined that wind could be hot.
Yeah.
So it was totally different. I fell asleep as we were driving into the valley. My first time at 13 arriving into the valley. And I woke up as we were heading up Reseda Boulevard. And for any of you who have never done that, it's lined with cinder block walls, like, very common in Los Angeles, and electric light and stuff like that. And I swear I thought I was on Mars. I had never in my life seen anything like that, right? Because I had come from a little town of like 5,000 in the trees. So yeah, it was really, really different. Yeah, absolutely.
You were so accustomed to being more with nature and then coming here and seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big change.
Yeah.
So, where are some places that you've displayed your art so far?
Well, I have, like you mentioned, I have artwork here at ToolBox LA. I do light-reactive murals, and there's a couple here on display. I also am going to Burning Man this year, where I've done art for a few years now. This will be my 11th consecutive year there. And this year I'm taking back an installation that I did last year called Mind Murmur. We can talk about it. It was a labor of love that almost ate me alive. But I did it, and I survived, and I came out like stronger, bigger, better, faster on the other end of it. And I'm taking that back this year. So that'll be the primary art piece I take to Burning Man this year. It'll be out in the desert with probably like 450 other art installations. It's going to be it's the biggest art festival in the world, really. That's what it is. And I'm also taking a couple of smaller art installations with me too this year.
Nice.
As well as doing a beautifully designed and curated chai house for people. Because Burning Man is all about giving of yourself and turning other people's minds and hearts on. So that's what I'll be doing. But I just got the word yesterday. We got the paperwork. I collaborate with 1111 Creative Collective, who also organizes artwork here at ToolBox LA. We just got the word that my art proposal for creating public art for the city of Burbank was accepted.
Oh wow, congrats.
So yeah, thank you. So I will be creating an art installation for Verdugo Park in Burbank.
Nice.
Yeah. And I'm doing lots of research on that. I do a lot of research for the pieces that I do. So right now I'm like online. I found all of these old, like typed on, you can tell they were typed on old typewriters, these old books online about Burbank history going back to like before any Europeans, before the Spaniards got here, you know, the history starting there, and then just coming up, seeing the history of the valley is so interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's a cool project.
Yeah.
So, in regards to the project that you do have here at ToolBox LA, that's the light reactive art, right? So, what exactly is light reactive art for people who don't know, and how did you create this project that you have in here?
So I call it light reactive art because I don't know what else to call it. But it's basic color theory, actually. So white light, like right now you are watching me through white light, right? You guys watching this, we're being flooded with white light. And the human eye is able to see all sorts of colors because the white light is hitting it and bouncing back, right? So like this pink of this rubber band looks pink because it's being flooded with a full spectrum of light, okay? But that white light can be broken into 3 basic components, which are red light, blue light, and green light. So if I took just plain red light and there was no blue or green in it and shined it on this, it wouldn't look pink anymore. It would look like a different color. And in fact, some colors, depending on what color you're shining on them, will totally disappear. So what I do with my murals is that I use pure tints, right, for the ink, which are cyan, magenta, and yellow. And I alternate red, green, and blue lights on them, so that different portions of the mural will disappear depending on what light is being on, and certain portions of it will appear. So even though it's a printed static image, it looks like it's morphing and changing over time as I illuminate it with light. So that at night, like if I light it with red, green, blue lights, it's really interesting and almost looks animated. But during the day, there's these beautiful, bright, vivid colors. So you've got just this beautiful daytime image and this cool animation at night. And for me, I use that animation with intent. I'm usually trying to talk about, how do I put it? Trying to talk about cycle, like large cycle of life and death and rebirth and all of that stuff. So I use a lot of imagery that speaks to that, like ancient symbols that speak about cycle, like the snake's tail is in its mouth. Is one of my favorite sayings, and that's the Oribus. But I use different symbols from our ancestors, including symbols from the rocks here that were painted, you know, hundreds or thousands of years ago, and other stuff, Viking symbols, Vedic symbols, just all sorts of stuff, and engravings. And I spend a lot of time researching the place that the mural's going to be. So for example, here at ToolBox LA, for the murals, I heavily researched Chatsworth. I researched everything I could find out about it, about the rock formations, about the ocean that used to cover this place, I researched the tribes that lived here. There are burial sites here, solstice markers, cave paintings. I researched the Santa Susana field lab work that was done that took us to the moon. The rockets were tested. All of that stuff is in that mural. So it's like now and then are like swimming together. They're spinning together. It looks like I intentionally designed it so it looks like everything is flying and swimming together, because the Chatsworth foothills, where I have meditated under like scorching sunlight, they've taught me a lot about time. So I wanted to share that with people. And I think it was pretty successful.
I mean, it's an amazing piece of art.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Like, again, when I was here at First Fridays, I saw everybody going up there and just being like, wow, this is amazing. And then, again, like you said, you don't really know what to call it, but I'm sure there's similar things like that, but to be honest, it's not very popular enough where a lot of people see it before, because I've never seen anything like that. And maybe I'm not too deep into art enough to have seen something like that, or I don't know, maybe that's just my personal experience, but I've never seen anything like that. So I stood there about like 10 minutes just watching it change figures and the design of it and just trying to understand it until you came up there. But it's amazing how much meaning is in it when you described all the symbols that it has and what they mean to you or what they mean to the city. But it's really cool stuff. You've also collaborated with some programmers and you learned to work with the Raspberry Pi. What was that project about?
Well, it wasn't a project. It's a lot of projects. But I know a lot of programmers, and I'm a hack myself. Like, I am not a programmer, but I'm a decent hack. So I do some web development. My brother was a programmer. Just a lot of people close to me were programmers. So my head was always in that space, you know. So what that's about is technology is changing everything, right? Really rapidly. And it's changing art too. And I might be a little ahead of the curve, you know, because I've been going to Burning Man for a long time. And the artists at Burning Man are generally pushing the forefront of technology and art. So I went there and I had my mind blown by technology and art, you know, coming together. There's so many incredible art installations done there. So I got it into my head a few years ago that I was going to start making art installations for Burning Man. And my first one that required programming for Burning Man was called Midnight Star. And I wanted to do something that was not just flashy and pretty, but that tied into the cosmos, okay? Because we're all out there in this huge desert, and we're under the moon, we're under the stars. So I wanted something that would involve, plus I'm fascinated with solstice markers, which are all about alignment with celestial objects. So I wanted to do an art piece that tied in the Burning Man event with the sky and with what was happening in the sky. I had always wanted to do that. So what I settled on was at midnight, I had these 7 LED hoops that were programmable. So that means I could make them blink, I could make them change colors, whatever. And they were arranged in a very specific pattern. So I'm actually kind of drawing it, but it would have to be backwards for you guys to see it. They were arranged like this. And that's, of course, the Big Dipper. There's 7 stars in the Big Dipper. So I had them positioned exactly so that at midnight, when the Big Dipper swept down onto the horizon of Burning Man, each star would align with those hoops. And it took hundreds of calculations that I had to do with an astronomer to know where it was going to be. Like, this was not a trivial matter. I worked with an actual physicist on this. And we had a programmer from France named Aurel. Hi, Aurel. and a wonderful man named Pat who does audiovisual professionally. And we worked like 18-hour days to get this thing built out in the middle of the desert because none of us had ever met before. I did a soundtrack that I loved. It was actually, I call it a soundscape. What I did was I went through NASA's online archives. So I'll just insert, I started playing piano when I was like 6. So music at one point in my life as a teenager, it was the most important thing to me. So almost all of my art installations have sound in them. But anyhow, for Midnight Star, I like trolled through all of these NASA archives and I found all these recordings where they had recorded the electromagnetic waves of different planets and different like quasars and black holes, and then lifted that up and they translated into the realm of sound. So I had all these sounds that were from literally from outer space, the sounds of planets, the sounds of different, I don't even remember what they're called now, but just like different streamers that would go through the atmosphere. And I took quotes from beloved physicists like Carl Sagan, who everybody loves. I love that guy. And some other wonderful physicists. And I just went to work on it with sound processing. And you know, I used to live in Chicago and I was deeply influenced by street culture there and hip hop. So I've got a little bit of that flavor into that soundtrack too. But there's also like non-denominational prayer in there that I authored that's really important to me about meditation and opening your mind. And so all together, it was, I've been talking a long time about it. I'm sorry, but I really loved that project.
Stuff. Yeah.
I love that project. It was so sweet that we were, because if you go to Burning Man, there's all these really big, spectacular pieces, and ours was such a sweet idea, you know, to connect with the stars, and that, you know, he relied a lot on programming. So we used a Raspberry Pi and we used little DMX control boxes. There was a lot of technology that I had to learn. It was a really, really big learning curve. And we did it. We pulled it off. It was really sweet. People liked it.
It's cool because I don't think I really thought about so much how artists don't just stay within like art. You know, there's art everywhere in everything, but I never thought about so much all the collaboration between, for example, this piece you made. You had astronomers and physicists and yourself and other people working on this type of things, and it's amazing how you guys collaborate to create one beautiful installation. That's some cool stuff.
Well, thank you. That team was like, I think 7 altogether, I would say. But the next one, if you don't mind, I'll talk about Mind Murmur.
Definitely.
That's my current baby.
Yeah, no, definitely talk about it.
So Mind Murmur, I swear that thing took 30 to 40 people to put together. Wow. So I can honestly say like 20% of what I did was artwork, and the rest was project management, learning. I had to learn structural engineering. I worked with 2 structural engineers. I had to learn about brain science. We had Etty Ben-Simon, a talented, wonderful PhD who's doing her residency up at Berkeley. She helped us understand EEG, which is how to read brainwaves. I'll get to why we had to do that in a minute. Nir Lahav, who was the physicist who worked on Midnight Star, he also consulted because his field of expertise is the physics of consciousness. So we consulted with 2 brain scientists. I worked with 2 seamstresses because I had to, in essence, sew an industrial-sized sail, 2 of them. I didn't know anything about that. I worked with a team of really talented programmers from Google, from Uber, from running their own businesses. We had builders who helped us build. It was a lot of carpenter. Thank you, Robin. My friend Robin helped us design and build the boxes that house the projectors. Okay. So it was a huge team effort to get this thing working, and none of us, hardly any of us, had met before we met at Burning Man and built the thing. It was all done online. We communicated through Skype. We had our sessions on Skype every week. We would discuss the project. And that's kind of the realm of programmers, right? A lot of us work remotely. I've worked remotely most of my career. So to me, that's second nature. But I've never done that and built a physical art piece as a result that actually worked and was a real substantial project. So that we could put that together and pull it off and have it work when we got to Burning Man is kind of mind-blowing. Yeah. I wasn't sure we'd be able to do it. And that project literally ate 8 months of my life. You know, that's what I did for 8 months of my life. I pretended to do other stuff like work at the same time. Not pretend, I actually did, but my real focus was that art project. So let me tell you what it was. So Mind Murmur is a 13-foot tall pyramid that sits out in the desert. It's open on 2 sides, but it's all like 4 points, and it goes up to a pinnacle, so it's a pyramid. And 2 sides of it are this tent-like material, but this tent-like material is super tough and engineered to survive 100-mile-an-hour winds. So at night, it's a nighttime piece. We have a meditator sitting on a podium beneath the pyramid. So they're completely centered inside the pyramid. And I designed it so that when they're sitting in lotus position, which is the classic position that somebody would meditate in, anybody can walk up to them. By the way, the meditator's eyes would be closed. They'd be wearing an EEG headset, which is it just looks like ear pods basically, but it's reading their brain waves. So it goes here and behind the ears. We're literally reading their brain waves as they meditate. And but Sophia, a very talented Russian programmer. Hi, Sophia. Love you. She wrote a custom algorithm to make sense of the brainwave data so that we could tell when somebody was transitioning through different stages of meditation. So we determined whether they were going deeper into meditation or coming up from a deep spot into a shallower form of meditation. And the pyramid like pulsed and responded to their meditative state. It was really pretty. So the way that it pulsed and responded was 3 ways. We had, like I said, I love sound. So I worked with a very talented sound artist named Julia Ferguson. She does exquisite work. Hi, Julia. And she and I together crafted 5 soundscapes. So we had 5 levels of meditation. We also had LED lights coming down on the vertices of the pyramid and an LED chandelier coming down from the pinnacle hanging above the meditator's head. So those lights were pulsing with the meditation. And we also had 2 projectors on the outside of the pyramid. And this was a really sweet part of it. This is sort of a very beautiful part of it. The brainwave data of the meditator was being used in real time to create the video images that we were projecting. We took fractal algorithms, very beautiful, lush fractal algorithms, and we controlled the speed, the angle, the color with the actual brainwave data. So you were seeing their brains literally move the fractals when the headset was off, the fractals did not move. So it was a lush, beautiful art installation out there. One of many beautiful art installations out there. There's amazing work out there.
That's
at Burning
amazing.
Man. Yeah, so we're taking it back this year with some improvements. Sophia is taking our elegant algorithm and making it even more robust and better at what it does. We got a new computer. We're going through the code. The fractals are going to be smoother. It's just all going to be a little bit better this year. Yeah.
That's an amazing project. I wish I would have been there to experience that.
Well, sometimes I set up a mini version of it here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you might get a chance.
Oh, definitely. I'll look out for that.
Yeah, I've done it a couple times here.
No, it's cool.
Yeah. We want to, like, part of the goal with Mind Murmur is actually to revisit the structure. So the technology is there. We've got the sound, we've got, the LEDs, the video, the fractals, but it doesn't have to be on this pyramid. Like, it could be projected onto a museum wall. That's my goal, to get this shown at regional museums and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's actually something I was looking into. I can't remember the name of the artist, but it derives from something called, I think, light healing. So the way I guess it works is just, actually, the reason I found out about it is Kanye West. He has something called Sunday Service now, and what it is it's like his little version of a church, or it is a church, and he worked with an artist to have certain light inside this room with this certain specific sounds that he said that he made without the whole like boom, 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 certain spectrums of the music that you hear that kind of gets you more into a different zone. And he changed up his whole music style to correlate with the light in a way that people are in a different state of mind while they're there, because he suffered with I think it was bipolar disorder, and he said that working with this artist helped him a lot, and it also helps people with, for example, anxiety, and it helps them feel more relaxed and calm and work in this type of way. So it's amazing, because that your amazing installation is stuff that can help people even just, you said, meditate, relax. Even if someone has anxiety, I would assume that could help them in a way where they might be freaking out about something, and get in a spot like that and just, relax and calm down. And so it's amazing how powerful art has always been, but is continuing to become.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll just speak to that for just a little bit. But I did that installation because I love meditation, and it. People say this all the time, but it changed my life. I started meditating 10 years ago at a time of personal crisis, and I'm really glad, like the cliche that we're glad for our struggles. I am now, because I'm a much stronger person, and meditation was a big part of that. I still try to do it daily. Brought me so much clarity on the difference between the story of who I am and what I really am. And a lot of freedom came with that. I'm not only my history, I'm not only my narrative, I'm also that thing that each of us has, like the consciousness. Like in the word namaste, which I'm sure a lot of people hear a lot, one of my favorite interpretations for that word is the light in me recognizes the light in you. And I think I probably thought of it as a euphemism when I first started using it. And then I realized that the ancients were actually literally saying the light in me, the starlight that we're made of, right? It recognizes the light in you. We're from the same source. one of that soundtrack that I did for Midnight Star, the piece about the Big Dipper, it had a quote from a scientist, and I wish I could might be Michelle Thaler. Actually, I think it is Michelle Thaler, a cosmologist, physicist. And she said, I want to see if I can quote it correctly. I know where you come from. No, hold on. She says, I know where I come from, and I know where you come from. The iron that makes my blood red was literally forged the instant a star died. And then she goes on to say, we've swept through their material. As our galaxy moves through, we sweep through that material, and their matter is in us today. We're comprised of starlight, In many ways, I could go on about that, but yeah. Meditation got me way more in touch with that thing that I really am,
Do you believe like meditation helped you become a better artist?
Yeah. It helped me become a better human being and hence a better artist. And by better, I mean happier, stronger, more clear, more capable of doing what I want to do. I don't mean like a good or bad person.
Yeah.
I mean a fit, well person who's able to contribute.
So what are some struggles or obstacles that you believe like you face as an artist, or artists face in general, I guess?
I think that depends on who the artist is.
Okay, yourself. Let's say yourself. What do you think?
Well, let me start with the struggles I faced, because that's a little more clear than the ones I'm currently facing. But definitely to make art on the scale that I'm making it now. Okay, let me start by saying I've always been an artist. When I was 5 years old, I identified as an artist. And I used to do drawings, and there were two things I wanted to be when I was 5 and 6. They were be an artist and an architect, and I can't remember which order they came in because they were both always there, right? So I've always been doing art, but I would say it's like in order to do the art on the scale that I'm doing it now, I had to face a lot of pain. And I had to work through a lot of pain and confusion about who I am. So that was a long process that I had a pretty, well, let me just say, like, there's a lot of people who have very tough times when they're kids. I had a tough time in my late teens, a lot of family turmoil. And it deeply affected who I became as an adult. So I had to work through a lot of that in order to realize that I was worthy of being the artist I knew I wanted to become. And I just encourage anybody out there, no matter what walk of life you're in, face those shadows. They're not as difficult or dark or scary as you think, and they're not unique. Like, I talked to a lot of people in my process of personal healing, and I found out that I was not unique in that suffering. Like, all of that stuff that I had gone through, other people had been through. So that was a really important struggle, and that seriously started about 10 years ago when I started working on those issues. And I had been making really nice art, but I wanted to make art on a different scale that I knew I was capable of. And something was always holding me back. And I think it was low self-esteem, to be honest. So that was a struggle that had to be worked through. Then about 3-4 years ago, I started just diving in and trying to do stuff. And those struggles, gosh, I don't even know what to say. Just learning how to take a leap of faith, just dive in and be aware that no matter what, it was me who was going to make it happen or not happen. It was either I was going to do what it took, I was going to be incredibly uncomfortable, learn lots of things that nobody was teaching me, nobody was paying me to do, take it upon myself to do this stuff, work a lot of hours unpaid, late into the night, be tired, wake up the next morning, take it up again for months on end. Like I learned how to do that through art. I didn't do it all at once. I did it in stages. Like Midnight Star was hard. It was a lot of work. And I learned a lot of things on that project that enabled me to then take on Mind Murmur, this crazy idea I had. I'm going to build a mind reading pyramid out in the desert that, is beautiful, and it's reading some meditator's brainwaves. I told my programmer that, and he's like, well, that's a pretty ambitious project. Yeah. And I knew nothing about nothing. I knew nothing about projection. I knew nothing about mind reading. I knew nothing about sewing a sail that's going to survive 100-mile-an-hour winds out there. I didn't know anything, and it ate me alive. It truly ate me alive. So the biggest challenge on that project was when I hit rock bottom and I didn't want it anymore. When I just felt like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? It's eating me alive. That I woke up the next morning and I kept going. And I woke up the next morning and I kept going. And even when I wanted to cry because I was so tired and frustrated, I kept going. And I came out the other side the same person. I was me, but I was a stronger, smarter, faster, better, kinder, more compassionate person who's capable of doing projects on a scale that I had always wanted to do. Like I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to build these structures, right? My crew and I brought something up that I imagined out of nothing, and we made it happen. And we did it with donations. I was fundraising too. It's part of being an artist. Got to fundraise. We pulled this thing out of nothing, and it made people happy and opened their minds, and people really love it. So lots of struggles. I mean, there's always creative struggle. You asked me to answer some questions before this interview, and you asked me that specific question. You asked me, what are some of the struggles that artists face? And I told you a story. It's a little true story that was said about Miles Davis. And it was said that Miles Davis, and for anyone who might not know, he's one of the greatest jazz artists of all time. Just brilliant man, incredible music. And he stood on the edge of the known world when he improvised his music. He did that each night. He stood at the edge of what was known, and then he went into the expanse. And that is not an easy thing to do. So it was said of him that to take the edge off of that, that's why he did heroin. And I'm not advocating heroin, by the way, because I've lived with an addict. I don't advocate it for anyone. It's horrible. It's like hell on earth, actually. But I understand what they were saying about Miles Davis, and I understand that experience of standing on the edge of what you know, and it's really something to pull something real out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. It's never easy. Like, it can be fun. It can be gestural. I shouldn't say it's never easy. For some people it is. And for me, sometimes it is.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's really easy. I'll sit down at the piano and it'll just flow.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's not so easy. And it takes guts and courage and stamina and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are some of your future plans with your art that you know of so far?
Well, future plans are, there was a public call made by the city of Burbank, and they have funding for public art there.
Mm.
So I answered that call for this one particular project. I assumed that, and I think it's true, that a ton of artists applied because it was a pretty sizable budget that we have to work with. So I worked really hard on it, and we were accepted, as I mentioned before. So I'm the artist who's going to have the privilege and the task and the job of creating an art installation outside of the Verdugo Park Aquatic Center. So that's my next upcoming project.
Nice.
And it's going to be really like fun because it's a park where kids go.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make it interactive and playful at the same time, like being beautiful and artful. So we're going to have a mural in the background, but up in front there are going to be these 7 very tall, like between 9 and 11 feet tall, chimes. They're called bass chimes. They have a deep tone, but if you strike them, they make the sound of an octave because there's 7 of them.
Oh, okay.
They're tuned to an octave, so people can play duets.
Nice.
And they're going to have graphics on them that match the mural or play off the mural. And we'll have another little sculptural element that spins and makes sounds, and it'll be playful and fun.
Did they tell you that's what they wanted, or was that like your vision for it?
Heck no.
Okay.
They just put a call out for installations, and I came up with a few different ideas, and that was my favorite one.
Nice.
Partially because it has sound. I love sound. And it's playful. I think it's just perfect for a park.
No, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, so right now I'm like researching the hell out of Burbank's history because I'm going to do this mural, and it's going to definitely speak to the specifics of Burbank. Yeah, they have a super interesting history. I've been just poring over these old archival books online that were written in, like the 1970s, 1920s, with just so interesting over Burbank.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So, besides art, do you have any other hobbies or passions? I know you mentioned you used to play piano. Do you still play piano or anything?
Well, sometimes. Not lately.
Not lately.
But I have a piano at my house, and when I'm practicing, I'm pretty good at improv. My background is classical. That's what I was trained in, voice and piano. So I like to just sit down and like do classical improv, basically. Nice. But I love jazz, so it's in there too. Yeah. Trail running, I run with my dog.
Yeah.
I do gardening, meditation, yoga. I love yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super important too. Yeah.
So, what's one piece of advice you would give to the audience? And it could be about becoming an artist or just about life. Because I think you've given great advice so far on both. If you had to give one piece of advice, what would it be?
One piece?
One piece. You can give multiple if you want.
One piece of advice. Okay. Trust what you know to be true. That's kind of my deepest advice. And I mean that, I will illustrate what I mean with a story, a true story. So I grew up in Pennsylvania in the forest. And when I was a kid, we didn't have computers and stuff. They were just coming out. We actually had one, but it wasn't our life. We didn't have cell phones. All that stuff was still science fiction. So all the kids would come outside at night and we would play a game called Kick the Can, right? I don't know do you know Kick the Can?
No, I don't.
Anyhow, all the kids take a can, they put it in the middle of the yard, and there's one person who is it. They close their eyes, everybody else runs and hides. And the person who is it has to tag somebody before the other people kick the can.
Oh, okay.
So it's called Kick the Can. So we're playing that. Yeah, it's a really super fun game. So we were playing that, and it was a perfect summer night. Like, if you've ever lived in a forest, you can literally feel it humming with life. And it's dusk time. There's crickets. You can feel the forest. It resonates with you. And I grew up there, so I was like an animal in the forest. I knew how to connect with the forest. There's cornfields over here, stables over there, and then the looming forest and creek over here. And we're in the yard, and all the kids are running around. They're laughing, giggling, screaming. It's a big yard. It's not like LA. You have acres of yard there. And so everyone's running around, and I just remember for some reason, I just kind of stopped in the middle of the yard, and I dropped my head back, and I knew. It wasn't an idea. It was like my body told me, like, direct connection from my feet, the soil under my feet, all the way to the stars, that it's all the same. We're connected. And that, like, I felt it. It was not an idea. I had to put words to it later. I knew it to be true. And that's one of the definitive experiences of my life. I've had a lot of definitive experiences that are beautiful. That was a really early one that I remember very, very well. And I have always known it to be true. I've never doubted it. My advice to you all is, if you know who you are and you know something like that is real, be reasonable, but also know that knowledge can be direct. Yeah.
That was great. That was great advice. So that's actually it for episode 6 today on the Entanglement. Again, thank you, Dina. It was a pleasure to have you on here, and great to see you again, talk about your knowledge and your experiences as an artist. I want to say thank you to ToolBox LA as well for letting us set up here. And go check out some of her art here at ToolBox LA. There's 2 installations, right? Two. Or in the other places that you've displayed them as well.
Can I do a little pitch?
Yeah, you can, of course.
Yeah, so if you want to see my artwork, please go to my personal website, which is dinafisher.net. And you spell that DINAFISHER.net. And you can just see what I'm up to. And shout out for ToolBox LA. It's a great place. Check it out.
We'll also definitely add it onto the description and in the video. So we'll add your website, and we'll also add the Instagram, her Instagram, and ToolBox LA Instagram, as well as I also want to say thank you to Reseda, as always, our videographer who sets up this podcast for us, and Gio as well for coming along with us and doing some photography. Thank you everyone who watched this, and hope you guys enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you.